The contractions hit me like knives carving through my insides, waves of pain that made my body shake. Sweat drenched my face as I clutched my swollen belly, begging for someone, anyone, to help me. I was 25, alone in the living room of my parents' house, doubled over on the worn couch. My voice cracked as I screamed, "Mom! Dad! Please! The baby's coming!" But instead of footsteps rushing toward me, the sound that came back was the blaring of the television. The pageant music swelled louder, like a cruel soundtrack to my agony. I turned my head toward the noise, and there was my dad, slouched in his recliner with a beer in one hand and the remote in the other. He didn't even glance at me. He just sneered at the sight of me writhing. "Your sister's big night is on," he barked, turning the volume higher. "No one wants to hear your disgusting screams. If you can't handle it, crawl outside. Go give birth in the dirt like the animal you are." Please subscribe to our channel and tell us in comments from where are you watching this video. My mother didn't move to my side either. She sat perched on the edge of the couch, her eyes glued to the screen as though she were watching her own coronation. My sister Megan was parading across the stage in glitter and sequins, smiling like royalty. Mom clapped and squealed. "That's my real daughter, the pride of this family." Then, with a glance of pure disdain, she spat, "And then there's you! Pathetic! Making noise, ruining this moment. Can't you at least suffer quietly?" I sobbed through the pain, clutching my belly as another contraction ripped through me. "Please," I begged. "I need to go to the hospital. Something's wrong. I can feel it." But Dad's laugh was sharp and cruel. "Hospital? For you? Why waste gas money? Your sister needs every penny for her gowns, her travel. You were always the family's shame. You think we're going to throw money at you while your sister's competing on national TV? You're not worth a ride across town." I tried to drag myself up from the couch, but my legs buckled under the weight of my belly and the pain tearing me apart. I collapsed to my knees on the carpet, clutching the edge of the coffee table for balance. My cries grew louder, but so did the TV. Dad pushed the remote again, smirking. "Hear that trash? The world's cheering for a star, not for garbage like you." My sister Megan's face flashed across the screen, her voice bubbling with rehearsed charm as she answered questions from the judges. Mom wiped tears of joy from her eyes. "She's perfect. She deserves everything." Then she looked at me again, her lip curling. "You were always a mistake. At least your pain proves it." The contractions came closer together now, unbearable, my breath coming in shallow gasps. I felt blood soaking through my dress, terror clawing at me. I cried out again, "I'm going to die if you don't help me." But instead of concern, Dad leaned forward, his eyes cold, and snarled, "Then do it quietly. Don't ruin your sister's big night. You were born worthless, and you'll die worthless." In that moment, I realized it didn't matter to them if I lived or died. To them, I was less than a person, less than even the family dog they pampered more than me. My screams didn't touch their hearts. They only fueled their cruelty. My body was failing me, and the people who should have cared most turned up the volume to drown me out. I crawled toward the door, nails digging into the carpet, dragging myself like prey, trying to escape predators. The hallway blurred in front of me as tears and sweat stung my eyes. My parents' laughter echoed behind me, their voices blending with the cheering of the pageant audience on TV. Mom's shrill voice cut through one last time. "If you die, at least the house will be quieter. Don't bother us again." And with that, I knew I wasn't their daughter. I was just noise to be silenced, shame to be erased. My strength was fading, but inside, a fire was sparking, stronger than the pain tearing me apart. If I survived this night, I swore they would regret every cruel word, every laugh, every moment they chose sequins and cameras over blood and breath. The cold night air slapped my face when I finally dragged myself through the front door. My body was shaking, my hands slippery with sweat and blood. But I knew if I stayed inside with them, I would die right there on that carpet while they cheered for Megan on TV. I stumbled into the yard, my knees scraping against the rough cement, clutching my belly as another contraction crushed me. The street was silent except for the faint hum of cars in the distance. My parents' house glowed warm behind me, laughter echoing faintly through the windows. They didn't even check if I was breathing. I staggered toward the sidewalk, my mind blurry, desperate for help. Every step felt like my bones would snap under the weight of my body. I raised a shaking hand at a car passing by, but the driver only glanced at me and kept going. I wanted to collapse, to give up, but something inside me, maybe the tiny heartbeat fighting inside my womb, kept me moving. I found myself at the curb, clutching the mailbox post like it was my only anchor to life. Then, as if by a cruel twist of fate, my parents' car pulled out of the driveway. I froze, hopeful for a split second that they'd seen me struggling and changed their minds. But no. Dad rolled down the window, his face twisted in a mocking smile. "Still alive?" he jeered. Mom leaned over from the passenger seat, her sequined scarf catching the streetlight. "Why aren't you gone yet? Crawl faster, maybe you'll make it to the hospital before you bleed out." They both laughed, the sound hollow and sharp, before the tires screeched and they sped down the street, leaving me in the dark. I collapsed to the ground, tears burning my eyes. For a moment, I thought this was it, that my baby and I wouldn't survive. But then, headlights appeared again, slowing this time. A pickup truck stopped in front of me, and a man jumped out, rushing toward me. "Hey, are you okay?" His voice was filled with urgency, not mockery. He bent down, his hand steady but gentle. "You're in labor. We need to get you to the hospital now." I couldn't form words, only nodded, clutching at his sleeve. He scooped me up and carried me into his truck, his wife in the passenger seat twisting around with blankets and soft reassurances. "You're safe now, honey. We'll get you there." The warmth of their care, strangers who owed me nothing, cut deeper than any cruelty my parents had ever shown. Hours later, I was in a hospital bed, holding my newborn daughter in my arms. She was tiny but fierce, her cries slicing through the sterile room. Tears ran down my face as I whispered, "We made it." The nurse smiled at me softly. "You're stronger than you think." But the moment of peace was fleeting, because when the nurse returned, her brow furrowed, she asked, "Are your parents coming? We need to confirm some details with your next of kin." I laughed bitterly through my exhaustion. "They told me to die quietly. They're not coming." The nurse's eyes widened, her lips pressing into a thin line. She muttered, "Some people shouldn't be allowed to call themselves family." That sentence replayed in my head over the weeks that followed. My parents didn't call, didn't visit, didn't even send a message asking if I survived. Instead, Megan's victory at her pageant filled the local paper, my parents beaming beside her, pretending they were the perfect family. In every photo, their pride was plastered all over their faces. And me? I was erased, as though I'd never existed. But here's the thing. They forgot one detail. They forgot that survival turns pain into fuel. They thought leaving me to die would silence me forever, but it only gave me fire. Every feeding at 3 a.m., every diaper change with blistered hands, every lonely night in that small apartment hardened me. My parents thought they chose their real child, but all they did was create a daughter who owed them nothing, and who now had nothing to lose. When Megan's pageant photos started circulating on social media, I studied every single one. I noticed details, the sponsors behind her, the scholarships she claimed, the fake stories she told in interviews about her supportive family. Lies, all of it. And behind those lies were people, judges, donors, benefactors, who would not take kindly to finding out the truth. I didn't plan revenge overnight. I worked quietly, carefully. I found ways to get closer to the sponsors, volunteering where I could, slipping into the circles my sister and parents bragged about. I listened more than I spoke, always filing away information. By the time Megan was preparing for the next national round, I had enough to dismantle her shiny world piece by piece. The moment came when Megan was standing on stage at a fundraiser, my parents at her side, boasting about her selfless devotion to community. The audience applauded, eating up every word. That's when I made my move. Not with shouting, not with cameras, but with carefully placed whispers, timed phone calls, and documents slipped into the right hands. Within days, everything shifted. Sponsors pulled out. Judges started questioning her stories. And my parents? They scrambled like rats in a sinking ship. And the best part? They had no idea it was me. To them, it looked like Megan's own lies caught up with her. They never saw me in the background, calm and steady, watching as their empire of sequins and crowns collapsed. By the time the truth spread, Megan's career was dead. My parents' reputation was shredded, and when they came to me, finally, desperate, begging for help, I simply rocked my baby in my arms and said, "I screamed for you. You turned up the TV. Now it's your turn to scream, and I'll just sit here and listen." The night my plan reached its peak, I sat in my tiny apartment rocking my baby, the same daughter they once dared me to crawl outside with, and listened to the chaos unfold through the grapevine. Megan's big event, her so-called royal gala, was supposed to be the crowning jewel of her career. My parents rented out a ballroom, splurged on chandeliers and silk tablecloths, and bragged to anyone who would listen that their daughter was destined for greatness. But the morning of the gala, the main sponsor withdrew, citing integrity concerns. Hours later, 2 judges resigned, unwilling to be associated with fabricated charity claims. By evening, the press had started sniffing around, and whispers of fraud circled the ballroom before guests even arrived. I stayed home, feeding my baby warm milk while my phone buzzed with updates. My parents called me 6 times that night, but I let it ring. I knew why they were calling. Their empire was crumbling, and they wanted me to hold up the roof. At the gala, Megan strutted onto stage, but the lights felt harsher than usual. Instead of applause, the room was buzzing with murmurs. Didn't she say her volunteer work was with foster kids? But they checked. No such program exists. Her scholarship story doesn't match any records. My parents, standing in the front row, plastered fake smiles on their faces, but the sweat glistened at their temples. When the microphone screeched, Megan stammered, I want to thank my family for everything." But someone in the crowd shouted, "Which one? The one you erased or the one you lied about?" Laughter rippled through the audience, sharp and merciless. Megan's lips trembled, her hands shaking. My parents tried to rush the stage, but cameras were already flashing, catching their panic, their daughter's fake crown tilting as the world saw her for what she was, hollow. That night, their phones didn't stop ringing. Sponsors demanded explanations. Donors pulled back funding. Local reporters ran headlines about pageant fraud and false family image. 2 days later, my parents stood at my door. They didn't look regal or proud anymore. Dad's shirt was wrinkled, Mom's makeup smeared from crying. "Please," Dad said, his voice breaking for the first time in my life. "You have to help us fix this. We know it was you. Only you could have done this." I stood there in silence, my baby on my hip. I let them squirm in the doorway, let them see the child they abandoned and the life they left to rot. "You told me to crawl outside and give birth like an animal," I said quietly. "So crawl. Crawl away from my door because you don't belong here." They dropped to their knees, actually begging. Mom's voice cracked. "We didn't mean it." But I cut her off with a single line. "You meant every word, and now the world believes you." I closed the door in their faces. Through the peephole, I watched them sit there on the floor, broken, stripped of their crowns and titles. The same parents who once turned up the TV to drown out my screams were now forced to hear their own echoes in silence. Inside, my daughter stirred in my arms, and I whispered to her, "We don't need them. We never did." The difference was, now they finally knew it too. Please subscribe to our channel and tell us in comments from where are you watching this video.